All right, it's third hour of the show. Last week, the Quebec government announced it would open an office in Tel Aviv. It would mark the first time the province has officially established a full-time presence in the Middle East. But since the announcement, some have been critical, including Quebec Solidaire MNA Ruba Gazal. She opposes the government of Quebec opening an office in Israel. Let's talk a little bit more about this. We go now to Marvin Rotrand, National Director of Brith, Canada's League for Human Rights. Of course, you know him from his decades serving Montrealers at City Council as well. Marvin, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Elias. Nice to be invited.
First things first, Marvin. Let's talk about this office and why Quebec opening this office is important and what it says. What does this opening say about the relation between Quebec and Israel?
Well, what it says is it's a win-win situation, and there's going to be benefits for Quebec, for Canada, and for Israel. Trade between Canada and Israel has been growing in leaps and bounds. A free trade agreement was signed a couple of years ago, very similar to other free trade agreements that Canada has. And direct trade has mushroomed. In 2022, the government of Canada announced that it topped $2.1 billion. It's a large increase from the past. And that direct Canadian investment in Israel in 2021 was almost $530 million. Israeli investment in Canada is growing as well. But this doesn't come out of the blue. In 2022, and I believe it was in March, a Quebec economic mission was sent to Israel. It was headed by Pierre Fitzgibbon. And I have a suspicion they were looking at whether they should be opening an office in Dubai or in Tel Aviv. I think they opted for Tel Aviv because they saw much greater advantage and an overlay of technology and industry in Israel, which matches that in Quebec and what the government of Quebec wants to do. So this will be, I believe, the 35th foreign office that Quebec is opening in terms of vaunting Quebec industry, Quebec investments, Quebec exports, Quebec imports. They already have offices in places like Paris and Brussels and Tokyo, and it surprises people. They also have offices in places like Sao Paulo and Dakar, and this is going to be the first one in the Middle East. Quebec's not alone in doing this. Ontario has a slew of offices all around the world. Vaunting Ontario as a place you want to do business. And other provinces, particularly British Columbia and Alberta, have a lot of office, particularly along the Pacific Rim. I think that BC actually has 5 trade offices in China, which probably makes them first of any of the provinces. But even the smaller provinces understand that jobs and investment relate to how visible you are in business centers. And they send missions, even if they don't have a trade bureau open some of these provinces.
So,
and they're
Marvin,
they're competing against U.S. states who are doing exactly the same thing.
So that's, all that to say there's an excellent case for Quebec to open up this office. Yet, there are those people, and I brought up one, Ruba Gazal from Quebec Solidaire. It always happens on the left and extreme left, these opinions here, that are opposed. They say Quebec has no business going into Israel. They point out the treatment of Palestinians. They always close a blind eye to the treatment of Palestinians in every other country in the Middle East except for Israel. So I want to get to the opposition. What do you think is behind the people that say no to Quebec opening an office in Israel?
Israel recently celebrated its 75th anniversary. The day it became independent, it was invaded by the armies of 7 Arab states who were its neighbors, who pledged to destroy the Jewish state and to throw the Jews into the sea. It never happened, and Israel has grown into a democratic state, an economic power, a leader, a global leader in science and technology, an ally of Canada. We were one of the first countries to recognize Israel. The UN vote for the rebirth of the Jewish nation was overwhelming, but those who have never accepted it still don't accept it. However, we live in the era of the Abraham Accords. You have seen all the headlines I've seen about a possible agreement or understanding between Saudi Arabia and the United States and Israel, which will be a game changer in the Middle East. But let's get back to what Quebec will benefit here. The main products Israel sends to Canada right now are pharmaceuticals and medical equipment. But it's, rightly got the sobriquet of startup nation because it's done so much in terms of science and technology, creating centers of excellence. It excels in artificial intelligence, smart mobility, digital health, data sciences, things that offer other countries advantages. Israel has excelled in terms of medical research, and Quebec wants to do the same thing. There seems to me to be a good match for Quebec, and I don't think this was accidental. What I find astounding about all this is the great relations between the government of Canada and the government of Quebec, because the Quebec office will not be a standalone office. It's going to be run out of the Canadian embassy in Israel. And I think that must be a first ever. And maybe it's a harbinger of better relations between Quebec and the federal government going forward. So, look, there's always going to be detractors. There are people who feel that we should not be hosting, trade bureaus in China either because of what is widely seen as suppression of the Uyghur people and their religious rights, suppression of democracy in China. And there's always the argument between engagement and trade. In the case of Israel, the argument is less evident. Those who oppose it have always opposed it. In the National Assembly, there's a wide range support for the state of Israel, but there's one party, Quebec Solidaire, that has rarely had anything good to say. In 2009, Quebec Solidaire convention voted in favor of a position of boycott, divest, and sanction of the state of Israel that has been widely denounced as hateful and racist by those who feel that it unjustly targets the Jewish state. The National Assembly has tried on numerous occasions to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. I believe the way it's been explained to me is it requires a protocol motion, unanimous consent to make it to the floor, although it doesn't need unanimous vote to be adopted, and Quebec Solidaire has not allowed it to go forward. Mm-hmm. I want to say, though, that the leader of Quebec Solidaire has written to me on a couple of occasions and tried to differentiate opposition of their party to Israeli policies versus, their opposition to anti-Semitism. But I don't necessarily feel that everyone in the party shares his point of view.
So let me ask you this, Marvin, because we are running short on time here. So when I see this opposition, right, and I see it happen among parties that would describe themselves as being on the left, right, and then I look at other parties. Obviously we've been talking about Quebec Solidaire, but the Green Party, right, they've had their issues with anti-Semitism, right? They got rid of a leader that was Jewish because she dared to voice some support of Israel. We see this happen on the left quite a bit, but of course, if you ask people on the left about their support of LGBTs, if you ask people on the left about their support of women and equality, and then they look at Israel, a place where if you're gay or you're lesbian, and you look at a place like Israel, if you're a woman to have the best shot in the Middle East of having a successful life, it would be the place. And yet, for some reason, they've got a hang up on Israel. Do you think there's a clear link to anti-Semitism when you see that happen on the left?
There is opposition to Israel on the far left and the far right. It often strays over into anti-Semitism. Our experiences dealing with parties that define themselves as progressive in Canada is a mixed bag, and generally we find that when there is opposition within the party, it doesn't necessarily represent the majority opinion within that party. I'll give you an example. The Ontario New Democratic Party has endorsed the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. We've spoken with the current leader, Marit Stiles, who again reiterated the right of Israel to live in peace and security, while several, at least one of her caucus members, if not two, have made statements which are very questionable as to whether they are anti-Semitic or not. And we've seen other parties in other countries, like the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, confront the same sort of issues. With Quebec Solidaire, I really believe there has been a problem in the membership and in the caucus for people to grit their teeth and say the state of Israel has the right to exist, and it has the right to exist, in peace and harmony. But I don't believe that's necessarily a unanimous opinion. Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois has basically walked that fine line and indicated to us as an organization that his party recognizes the right state of Israel to exist. Their opinion, however, is a minority opinion in the National Assembly. I think there's widespread support for the Jewish state, and I think there's widespread support for growing trade and relations between Canada and Israel, and that includes Quebec getting a piece of the pie. Pierre Fitzgibbon's trip, his economic mission, which a lot of leaders of industry were on, obviously led to this. Minister Biron now is running with it. Quebec should be up and have its office functioning within a couple of months. As she said in her press release, there are a very large number of Israeli Jews who come from North Africa and the formerly from the Arab states, and a lot of them are Francophone. And that's also going to create cultural links between Quebec and that segment of the Israeli population.
Marvin, I got to leave it there. I want to thank you for your time this morning.
Well, thank you, Elias, as always. You always take up often difficult subjects, but I think subjects people want to hear about.
Thanks. Take care, Marvin. Appreciate it. That's Marvin Rotrand. He's National Director of B'nai Brith, Canada's League for Human Rights.